Welcome into the Dynasty After Party here. We are on Playoff Sunday. We had some amazing games last night, and I know what you are thinking. Half of you are tuning in just to not see me, but to see my co-host who underwent a very heartbreaking Saturday night. And I could tell behind the stage right now that he's not even happy about me bringing this up. But you're going to get to see Joel and all of his amazing work as well, because this week he released an amazing Dynasty tier article with quarterbacks. And we're going to be going through that today, giving our thoughts and our breakdown of the best Dynasty quarterbacks by tier, which is obviously the best way to draft. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, Joel, welcome into the main stage. I'm going to get out of the way early because I know you don't want to spend too much time talking about it. But the Green Bay Packers, albeit a very successful season, how you doing? How you holding up?
I'm all right. Didn't sleep much last night. It was pretty rough. Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked a little bit before the show. It was a really encouraging year. I think we accelerated the development curve much quicker than anyone expected. But still, to give that game away the way they did, I mean, they had so many chances to win that game. And the 49ers are playing without Deebo Samuel. You had so many, just chance after chance, offensively, defensively. They gave away, so many chances to pick off Brock Purdy. And the way you beat San Francisco has been proven this year is get turnovers. And they had 3 balls that went through their hands on defense. I mean, that's why those guys are DBs, and not receivers, but you got to make those plays. Yeah, it was. What's that water torture where you just drip water? Yeah, it was.
It's a car accident. You can't look away.
We can talk about the kicker. I mean, that's when he missed that field goal, you just knew the game was over. It was over at that point. So I mean, they played with them for basically 56 minutes. They were the better team, but it's a 60-minute game, and it is what it is. I mean, the youth came back to. I really think the really kind of underreported part of this is the 49ers were the better team down the stretch along the line. I mean, you could tell the Packers defensive line, especially on that last drive, the touchdown drive, that their D line was beat. I mean, they were gassed. They had nothing left. Playing without Kingsley Enagbare, who tore his ACL presumably last week, so they were stressed on their depth. They've been in playoff mode for 4 straight weeks. So, yeah, they were really gassed. They had no chance to stop the 49ers. And you could tell kind of on the offensive line as well. They're, in the fourth quarter, the 49ers defensive line really ratcheted up the pressure. That was part of why Jordan Love struggled so badly in the fourth quarter. So, yeah, I think just the 49ers had – and that's the importance of having the bye, right? You get that week off, and you're rested at the end of the fourth quarter in those last 4 minutes where it really counts.
Yeah, and Warren Sharp pointed out on Twitter as well of saying – the Ravens, were not smacking the Texans at halftime. They were certainly not. Right. And then they really had
they did in the fourth quarter.
Just like the 49ers, they rested people in week 18. They had a bye in wildcard round. And it took a while to get San Francisco going. And you could argue they really never did. But still, as much as it doesn't feel good to talk about right now, you can feel confident you have your quarterback. You can feel confident that you have a lot of good pieces. And Aaron Jones is at the very least going to go down in the Packers Ring of Honor type of at least ceremony in the hearts of Packers fans, because that man has given so much to Green Bay. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about this next week when we talk about running backs, but I think it's 100% he's back. Like
I'm with you.
He's like Goodkins said, he's earlier in the year that he is the heart and soul of this team. I mean, he's got a huge cap hit, but he took a pay cut this year. There's no way he's got like a $12 million pay cut or cap hit next year. There's no way anyone else is going to pay him that money. So he's not going to make that much money on the free market, especially when you talk about Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and Tony Pollard. All those guys are going to be in free agents as well. So yeah, he wants to be there. He'll be back 100%.
With you like that. Good to see Gator in the chat. Good afternoon. Happy Buccaneers game day. I'm pulling for the Bucs today. I feel good about them. He does ask on the topic of Jordan Love, who we're going to be talking about today as we get into those Dynasty QB tiers. What contract do you want for Jordan Love? as a Packer fan right now? Because he's going to get extended this offseason.
I tweeted out a couple weeks ago, I think it's 4 years, $48.5 million per, on top of next year. So I think he's got a year left on the deal that he signed. So I think whatever that turns
nearly
out,
4 years, 198, basically.
Something like, yeah, just shy of $200 million over 4 years.
Yeah, I guess that is about the going rate, which is wild. But yeah, I mean, he's earned every penny.
I mean, he's not getting a Daniel Jones $40 million. He's blown way past that.
Yeah.
I think he's going to get more than 48. I think they're going to want to do right by him. I think he's close to 50.
Yeah, and it makes sense to lock it in sooner than later. We see that with quarterbacks every year. Yep. And, you pay him 48, it feels like a lot. The next one comes in and sets it at 50, then 52. And
I mean, the salary cap is going up $25 million a year. So by the time that deal ends, it's going to look cheap.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just the way it is.
Within 2 years, it's going to look like a bargain, probably, especially if he keeps playing how he is playing. So good to see Mr. Butter jump in the chat. Don't think I've seen that name before, but good to see you here from Twitch. Always amazing to see our lovely listeners. But before we get into those Dynasty QB tiers, I just want to run through a couple headlines. We believe the Raiders have made the right choice. We talked about coaching last week, and the Raiders have went out and been the only team that have hired a head coach outside of the Patriots so far, if I'm not mistaken. Has been the Raiders rehiring Antonio Pierce. Their interim head coach becomes the head coach. Something we talked about last week is something we expected to happen, and it does, which I got to imagine we're both happy about.
Yeah, I mean, happy for him. Obviously, when your best player comes out and says, I'm demanding a trade, if you don't hire this guy, your hands are kind of tied. So, but the right decision. And we talked about it last week. This was the obvious no-brainer decision. That's what they had to do, and they did the right thing.
Yep, and it's always good to see that. We do expect Champ Bailey to probably be paired as the general manager there, but we'll keep you in the loop. Any other playoff news? Not really too much to dive into, I think, over the last week since. Now that we're back to weekly shows, feels good, Joel. But anything else you want to talk into before we dive into those Dynasty QB tiers?
The only thing is, I mean, we'll probably hit on this when we talk about Kirk. We talked about the coaching hires not last year. Seems like Belichick's going to get the Atlanta job if he wants it. That, I kind of went into this thinking that Kirk Cousins was almost a fait accompli, that he was going to go back to Minnesota. It would make sense for him to go to Atlanta because Belichick's going to want a veteran there, right? He's not going to want, he's got the infrastructure offensively. He's going to want a veteran who can run that. Probably going to bring back Josh McDaniels. So that would be a very interesting spot for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, it often gets lost in the translation, and it is worth noting that Bill Belichick has taken a second interview with Atlanta, as has Jim Harbaugh. But whoever gets the job, especially if it is Belichick with his age, they're taking it to win, and the moves that team will make will reflect that. It's not just the roster they have now. It's like what we saw in Tampa. Of Tampa bringing in Tom Brady, that meant they were winning now. They went out, they brought in Sue, and they brought on a bunch of veterans to help them get to that Super Bowl point that they did get to. So, yeah, 100% with you there. Kirk Cousins would be fantastic for everyone's Kyle Pitts, Drake London shares, Bijan Robinson shares, everyone compared to Desmond Ridder. So, yeah, I think he still goes back to Minnesota. I think he's got Minnesota in his blood.
I think there's a good chance, but I think it kind of makes it less likely that Fields becomes their, kind of assume that he might be a target for them. But is that a guy that Belichick's going to want to kind of hitch his wagon to? Doesn't seem like
he's done with the development part of his career. I think he is more than done. So. He did it 20 years ago, and he doesn't want to do it anymore. Justin Fields, Pittsburgh Steeler, but hopefully it won't happen. But, God, that would be amazing. I don't even want to think about it because it'll get me too excited. Anyway, let's jump into those Dynasty QB tiers. Joel, I know this was your article, so you wanted to take it away with how you broke down these tiers and your process and what we're about to do.
Yeah, so this is just very early offseason. Like I said, I didn't want to get too granular with this. There'll be more time for that later in the offseason, as we kind of ramp up to the draft and as we get more information. Just kind of big picture, where are the tiers right now? And, because like startups are happening, dispersals are happening for any orphans being taken over. Trades are happening, right? Some trading is opening up in some leagues. So, yeah, it's just get big picture overview where we are at this part of the season, the off season, I should say.
And right now, for those watching on YouTube, at least live right now, you are looking right at the article, which you can find at clubfantasyffl.com, which I'm going to toss in our chat if you want to follow along as we talk through it, as well as if you just want to read it, because Joel did a fantastic job of breaking down these quarterbacks. And I'm going to try not to spoil, as I might have done with Tier 2 there. But let's start with Tier 1. Now, 3 names you got there. That's Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Patrick Mahomes. And let me confirm, is this in order or is this just a general tier?
No. So basically, and I can explain this in the intro to the article. Anyone in the tiers is basically essentially equal to anyone else in the tier. So, and I, like I said, I wouldn't give up anything substantial to move up, one player for another player in that same tier.
Right.
If you want to, move around for portfolio purposes or exposure purposes, that may make some sense. But otherwise, I'm like, if I have Patrick Mahomes, I'm not giving up anything to go get Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts and vice versa. So.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. And I think there's going to be a lot of names on this on today's show that people are going to be surprised about. Some people might be surprised not to see Lamar Jackson in the tier 1 here. Which is probably the standout given his MVP season. But is this due to the health, or is that due to any other worries that you might have with Lamar Jackson?
I think it's more about just the community perception of him, or the market perception of him. I just don't think it's at this level of the Allen Hurts Mahomes tier. And like I said in the article, this tier is basically exactly the same as it was at this time last year.
Mm-hmm. And that's because talent doesn't change, right? I mean, these guys are true difference makers. We know what Josh Allen will do, both with his arm and his legs. Even Jalen Hurts in the down season was still a very good quarterback for most of his games because he
down season was 11 rushing touchdowns or something,
exactly.
Whatever it was.
Yeah. Down season was brotherly shove. And Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, and that's a talent you're never going to bet against. So it's always going to go there. Gator does throw out there that he is a little surprised that Jalen Hurts is in tier 1. I think that is the public perception of Jalen Hurts right now, is the market is down after a very disappointing end and back half to the Philadelphia Eagles season. I'm curious on your response to that, Joel.
See, I think the Eagles offense, I think the problem was either in the coordination of that offense or the change going from Shane Steichen to Brian Johnson. See, I'm like stunned that Brian Johnson is getting coaching interviews. I
don't get it. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. But
they may be token for whatever reason. We won't get too far into down that rabbit hole, but yeah. I mean, they really kind of struggled, especially at the end. Once they struggled early and they struggled late. So I think that's more of an offensive problem than a Jalen Hurts problem. And, we've heard that Sirianni is going to present a plan to the ownership group or to Jeffrey Lurie that's going to preserve his job. And presumably that means new coordinators on both ends. So, and going back into this season, I kind of thought that the Eagles would struggle with losing both their coordinators to head coaching jobs, right? Those are both very good coaches, especially Steichen. Yeah. So I'm not surprised that he struggled. Struggled is a relative term here, right? He still was extremely productive. Just kind of dropped off at the back end a little bit. So he's still got elite weapons. He's still got, the offensive line is still going to be very good, even though they're probably going to lose Jason Kelce, but maybe Lane Johnson, that might hurt. But yeah, right now, big picture, I still think he's in this tier.
Yeah, I mean, when you're your own goal line running back, it really does make quite a difference, even if you don't feel that way through the air at times. And as our beloved and ever handsome Joshua Hudson points out, over 4,400 yards and 38 touchdowns. Like Joel said, 11 on the ground. So, yeah, he's certainly a tier 1 type of guy for us. Gary does point out maybe it's recency bias, doesn't like the end of the season. Seems like a lot of the offensive players were down on Hurts's play. I'd view that a lot of the offensive players were down on Sirianni. I think we've talked about a bit on this show, and I think it's a popular narrative going around that I do buy into of Josh pointing out 15 rushing touchdowns. I apologize. But to Gator's point, I think a lot of people a lot of the players buy into Hurts's leadership, and if anything, they're a little bit worried about Sirianni's leadership. I think that's my bigger question mark, and that's the clips we've seen, the little bit that we know. Joel, do you have any thoughts on that before we move on?
Well, I guess Gator brings up a good point. This is what the point of this article is that if someone is, if the Hurts manager in your league is down on him and you can get him for a less than tier 1 price, then you should probably go do that, because I still think he's a tier 1 quarterback.
And just like that, Gator is starting a fight in the chat, calling Josh a homer. And Josh pointing out that Sirianni sucks. Dude needs to go. It's a fun day in Philadelphia where they don't go to the Super Bowl for a year, and all of a sudden they need to fire their coach. Listen, I'm not the biggest Sirianni guy, but you were there a year ago. He lost both his coordinators. Let's give him one more year to run this one back before throwing him to the wolves, in my opinion. But let's jump into tier 2, because tier 1, we have some discussion, but we have a lot of. This is going to be the type of show that gets better and better as we go through, because
more interesting.
So let's jump to tier 2 here and slide on down. Look at this one. Joe Burrow of the Bengals, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers, and everyone's favorite CJ Stroud making up the tier 2.
Yeah, so I get the only question mark that I see here is my inclusion of Love, and maybe the market doesn't value him that way. I don't know how you don't, when a first-year starter is second in the league in touchdown passes. Like, he didn't have 50 like Patrick Mahomes did, but otherwise his career arc is remarkably similar. So I'm not saying he's the next Patrick Mahomes. I'm just saying it's a very similar arc. So I think he absolutely belongs here. I think next year, like, he's got the youngest receiving core at the league, youngest team in the league. He's got the youngest receiving core historically, right? I mean, they've got the most production out of a year 1 and year 2 receivers in the history of the league, and it's not even close. So yeah, I mean, they're going to grow together. They're going to develop together. I think he's got more upside with his legs. I think that's one place where he really needs to work this offseason. Like ball security, understanding running lanes and stuff like that. But I think there's more upside. I think he had like 4 rushing touchdowns. That could grow. And I think there's more just rushing upside that he just didn't show. He wants to play from structure, and that's great. We want that from young quarterbacks. But I do think, and you saw last night, there were some opportunities where he could have just taken off and run and kind of picked up first downs. So I think that's something he's going to need to work on. And I think he will. And I think that's something that they will incorporate more next year. So yeah, I think he absolutely belongs in this tier. I don't think there's any other real questions. I pointed out in the article that I was kind of going into this. I was kind of looking at CJ Stroud as, maybe I should be selling high on him. And then he just lit up the Browns in the wild card game. I'm like, nope, I'm good. I'll hold. So yeah, I'll take calls, but I'm not making calls.
It's so real. It's happening with CJ Stroud. But on the Jordan Love subject, I'm with you. And we've been a very pro Jordan Love show since the summer about what this offense could be without Rodgers. And eventually it got there. And I'm all in with Jordan Love. This feels like a preemptive tier 2 of where he will be in the summer, because I do think the Packers are going to go out and continue to help build around Jordan Love. They're going to address the defense. They have to address the defense a little bit more, even despite the better end to the season. But they're not. They went into the season expecting Christian Watson to be their 1, and Christian Watson is at best their 3rd best receiver, maybe 4th. So I do expect better things to come for Green Bay. I think the perception will be higher, and he'll probably be someone I'm looking at in drafts, because you're right. He won't be in this tier 2 of ADP, but he probably should be, because I am all in. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid as well. He looks fantastic. And I'm all there for it. It's not easy to go on the road and look as good as he did for most of last night as well as last week. So Gator does ask, as well as pointing out that he really likes this tier 2. We have to throw Gator a bone ever so often. But he points out here, outside of Lamar Jackson, who could be tier 1 at the start of the season from tier 2? I love this question. Fantastic question. Which one of these quarterbacks, if you had to pick one, could make the jump?
Well, obviously Lamar could. I'm not sure what that offense is going to look like, right? Because we talked about Todd Monken possibly being a head coaching candidate. like Lamar's going to have that. He didn't show it this year, but he's still got that massive touchdown upside on the ground. And I think Stroud's perception in the community is probably very close to tier one as it is right now. I mean, you could make an argument that he possibly belongs with that group. I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see I'd like to see him do it again before I'm willing to move it up to that elite tier. But he may be, like I said, the perception of him may be tier one right now among the communities.
Yeah, if CJ Stroud escapes this offseason while in keeping Bobby Slowick as his offensive coordinator, CJ Stroud will be my answer. I have no doubt in the talent, and I fully expect him to make the huge leap next year. But if he loses his play caller, he loses his offensive coordinator, that could take a hit in making the next leap that we all expect him to make. So if Bobby Slowick stays in Houston, I'll say CJ Stroud. If not, I'm going to say Justin Herbert, even though I have no idea who he's throwing to. I have no idea who the coach is. I trust Justin Herbert, and I trust the talent to eventually win out. But again, I think it's a fantastic question because we could easily make the argument for any of these guys. And Mr. Butter pointing out as well that he thinks Murray is in tier two. We are going to be getting to Kyler Murray soon. That is
close. He's close.
Yeah, it's a quarterback that nobody really knows how to value, and because of that, he probably is a value. But let's jump over to tier three. Sliding on down here. Here's your Kyler Murray. Tier three quarterbacks: Justin Fields, Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy, and Anthony Richardson. Three guys that can run the ball and one guy that throws to people who can run the ball. Here we go. What are your thoughts?
I say we got a note in the chat from Joe Ortiz that Purdy should be in tier two. I mean, he's close. I don't have him there just because there's very little upside on the ground with him. And we saw that, like you said, he is very dependent on – this is not to take away from, his abilities. I'm not saying, because he's the last pick in the draft or whatever, that he's not a very, elite quarterback. He is. But he's very dependent on the offense and on the playmakers. We've never seen him without those playmakers, right? So that's why he's in this tier and not tier two. There's just very little upside on there, especially with Christian McCaffrey in the backfield with him. I mean, he's never going to be a goal line back when you've got Christian McCaffrey. I think he's firmly tier three. I don't think the community perception of Purdy is nearly as high or high enough to put him into the second tier. I just don't. And the same thing with Kyler Murray. I don't think the community values him in the same grouping with Burrow or Herbert or Stroud. Like, I don't think it's even close. Fields is kind of the wild card here, just because, where is he going to end up? What's his offense going to look like? The wild thing is, they could hire Cliff Kingsbury and just throw everyone a curveball and bring back Justin Fields. And what does that look like? I mean, that's crazy. So Richardson, I talked about, is the one in this tier that I could legitimately see jumping up to tier one. If he can put together a full season of what he did in 4 games, that elite upside is there. But he's got a lot of questions to answer. And like I said in the article, he did not play enough to answer the questions that he came into the league with. Early returns are promising, but 4 games does not a season make. And now you've just kind of added the durability question.
Yeah, it's really even been 2 games, and the 2 games he left early due to injury.
Right.
It's just that one of those games he already had, 35 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns before leaving in the second quarter. So, yeah, it's safe to say that Anthony Richardson does indeed have upside. And I love what you named this tier of that cellophane tier, ceiling tier, because the ceiling for all these guys, maybe not Brock Purdy, is QB1. Kyler Murray could be the QB1 because of how he can run the ball. Justin Fields, we have seen be the QB1 over a stretch. And obviously Anthony Richardson's ceiling speaks for himself. I think we all know that. And I did want to bring up in the chat a very funny interaction of Josh bringing up what the real difference is between Purdy and Tua, and the Devi Royale saying one is right-handed, one is left-handed. Gator adding in, have you seen them in the same room? Very funny stuff. I do love it. We do have a point from Deadwood Roy on the chat saying he thinks Love being above Richardson is a mistake. And I understand. It could be, because Richardson could have a terrible passing day and still do possibly what Jordan Love does on that same week just with his legs. That's a realistic possibility, that he runs for 70 and punches in 2 touchdowns and has 100 for 1-1 through the air, and that will crush most quarterbacks. But I understand there's still the question marks that Joel mentioned of how does this look with Jonathan Taylor? How does this look in the second season? Can he stay on the field? Will we see a expanded passing offense that he does actually take advantage of? So there are those question marks. And does Jonathan Taylor take O-line work? They didn't really play together. So do you have any rebuttal for this?
I think there's an argument that the community perception of Richardson is higher than Love. So I'm trying to balance where I would put these guys and where I think the community has them. Would I trade one for another? No, absolutely not. I think they're both elite, so I'm not giving up anything to move to another. If you offered me something to move from either one to the other, I would take it. So I could, the argument for putting Richardson in tier 2 was legit. I just haven't seen enough. I want to see more. I love it. I've got a ton of Richardson shares. I would love for him to move into the tier 1 status. But I got to see. I didn't, like I said before and in the article, he didn't play enough to answer the questions he had coming into the league entirely, and now he added the durability questions. So there's a lot he's got to answer before I'm willing to make that move.
And you bring up a good point in the article as well, which again you can read at clubfantasyffl.com. We put the link in the chat. Each of these guys are very capable starting options for fantasy. None of these are bad options. Just because they're tier 3 means they are very much can be your starter. And like you say, in one QB, you can maybe not set and forget, but you can come close to that for most matchups out there, for probably 70% of matchups outside the high end, the locked in defense for that year that you want to try to avoid. These guys can probably play against the rest of them, especially the rushing 3.
And this is the end of guys I'm okay with as single quarterback starters.
So we're about to get real dicey, but before we do that, I want to address what Mr. Butter pointed out before about Kyler possibly being in tier 2 if he gets Marvin Harrison Jr. Say Cardinals do that. Marvin Harrison Jr., do you jump Kyler Murray into tier 2 or tier 1 even?
If I had a year of elite production, I'm not going to do it just on the potential. I like Kyler a lot, but the community does not. Like, the community is not very high on Kyler. That's just a fact. Yeah, exactly. I think both of us are, but yeah, it's just the community. Like I said, I'm trying to balance my feelings and what I think the community's feelings are on these players. And Kyler is not. He's not as highly valued as anyone in tier 2 or tier 1, and I don't think it's close. So would the perception of him go up a little bit? Sure. But if you had Kyler Murray, do you think you could go trade him for Justin Herbert just on the potential of him with Marvin Harrison Jr.? No, I don't think so. So if they get on the field together and put together an elite season, then yeah, maybe he makes that jump. But, and like I said, that's more of a community perception issue than where I would rank them. So I think he's firmly in tier 3.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it'll be someone I'm going to be very much looking to buy over this offseason before that draft day happens, because they will add him another weapon with Marquise Brown, and Marquise Brown is still a good receiver himself. Let's go to tier 4 here. Slide on down into this one. This is what you call the they are what they are tier. Which I think is disrespectful to one of these names, but Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott, Tua Tagovailoa, and Deshaun Watson. Now, I'll be honest, Joel. I do my research before going on the show. I read the article before now, and this was the first one that I had strong feelings about. I had strong feelings about seeing Deshaun Watson's name in here. And he stinks, buddy. I'm sorry. He stinks. If I could think of the smelliest thing out there right now, right? If I could just think of, a big bag of poo, I think Deshaun Watson would be worse than that. So seeing him in this tier of my beloved Trevor Lawrence and my adoration for Dak Prescott, who is at least a fantasy merchant, and Tua being a fantasy merchant, you're going to have to explain yourself with Deshaun Watson here in tier 4.
I think the farther we get away from elite Deshaun Watson, the elite Houston Deshaun Watson, the less likely we are to ever see that again. But I still think that there is a section of the community that would value him with Tua, that would value him with Dak Prescott. I could see Trevor Lawrence is the one I had the toughest time because I think he probably belongs. I think he probably belongs a tier above this, but man, the community is super down on him. And I addressed this in the article. I don't get it. I think he's going to be the guy that I trade for the most because, yeah, I mean, his career high is like 25 touchdowns last year, right? He had 21 touchdowns this year in basically a worst case scenario season, right? He was injured at the end. Travis Etienne vultured a bunch of goal line touchdowns. Calvin Ridley dropped half a dozen. I don't know what the number was. Had a bunch of potential touchdowns. The offense just kind of failed. They had a terrible offensive line. So, they're going to get a new offensive coordinator. It's basically going to be Doug Peterson's offense. That's not really going to change, but they're going to add to the, whether it's another weapon in the passing game or another, some help on the offense. They need help on the O-line. Their O-line it's not Tennessee bad, but it's pretty bad. Yeah. So they're going to get him some help. I think this is probably your last buying opportunity if you want him, right? Because I think I think you agree. I think he's going to bounce back, but like I say, got to balance what I think and what the community thinks, and the community thinks is way down on Trevor Lawrence.
They are low on him, and it's equally blasphemous to me because, like you said, this was as low as he could get, and it still wasn't that bad of a season for him. I think he truly was he was playing with half of his body by the end of it. And if you if you look at it, he had 7 games with 100 or better passer rating, and all of those came before, all but one of those came before the month of December. It was those last 5 games where he really struggled, and that's when he was playing hurt. So, the last 5 games I think left a real stink as the Jaguars choked their way out of the playoffs, and Trevor Lawrence was playing on one leg. He missed a game and tried to come back for the Tennessee one. I just don't think he was right. And, I know PFF has put out a fantastic 2-minute video purely of Trevor Lawrence, like half a yard away from making a huge play, of the receiver dropped it or the receiver couldn't get the second foot in. There is literally 2 minutes long of just Trevor Lawrence throws that were either maybe a hair too long or the receiver couldn't catch it and get his foot in like an elite one would. So I think Calvin Ridley will be better next year. Another year with football under his belt after 2 years off of it. I expect them to add someone. They lost Christian Kirk down the stretch. They will get him back. And Evan Engram will still be there after getting extended last summer. So it's one of those guys that has a lot of returning pieces, and anything in addition to that means that he has this past year plus whatever they add this offseason. They're not losing much on offense, which is really a good thing. Now, I guess the big dynasty question right now as well is with Tua, who we talked about a little bit at length in the past of whether we think he gets extended. I think we both said that he won't get extended this offseason, or we wouldn't extend him this offseason. But Tua was a great fantasy option for a lot of the season, kind of crumbled towards the end. Is this more of a fear of the end of the fear of the future of what Tua could hold as versus what he does on the field right now?
I think the market just doesn't think he's very good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think regardless of what we may think, the market is just down on him. I think everybody thinks he's a product of having Tyreek Hill in that same offense and being in the Mike McDaniel offense. I've seen some articles with like suggestions that he's going to get traded. That doesn't make sense to me at all. I don't know.
Where does he go?
I'm just not buying. One I saw, it was some crazy three-way trade that sent him to Denver and Fields to Miami or something. It was bizarre.
Oh, so Denver's going all in on another quarterback?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that made no sense to me. So yeah, he's another one who has, realistically zero potential on the ground. He's not going to give any rushing floor or anything like that. So Prescott, like, he's in his early 30s. I mean, he had a great year this year, but I think people are going to look at that as a career year, kind of the best it's ever going to get. Like I said, he is in his early 30s, so I think everybody's going to look at him as kind of backsloping it. So, like I said, he led the league in touchdown passes, had a great season this year, was obviously a quality fantasy starter. I don't think that the community is going to look at him like that.
Dak Prescott
QB2, but not a QB1.
Yeah, Dak Prescott is and kind of has been for me my new Kirk Cousins, of someone I can get in the mid to later of the draft that will continue to put up mid to back end QB1 numbers every single year because the situation around him is great and he's a good enough quarterback to do so. And
bring back McCarthy is good for him.
Wrong with it, but like you say, they are what they are. I think it perfectly fits Dak Prescott. Let's jump down to, unless you have any more for Tier 4.
No, that's it.
All right, let's go on down to Tier 5 here. Oh boy, you didn't see that. Tier 5, and this was the group that has that young untapped potentially, and we'll see what happens. The Bryce Young and the Will Levis here in Tier 5.
Yeah, this is very much the eye of the beholder tier, right? It's, did you like these guys as prospects, and do you think there's room for improvement? Obviously, there's room for improvement. There's a lot of room. But I said Bryce Young, I don't think he's going to be capable of being a starter in the next 2 years, just because it's going to take so long to build the infrastructure that he needs. And we've talked about this in the past, because he's, so short and small. He needs a really good offensive line that can kind of clear space in front of him. So he's got room, or he's got, vision through the passing lanes. And he's going to need much better receivers than what he's got. Now, can they get something in free agency? And then they are picking first in every round except the first. So there's the opportunity, but the guys they bring in are going to be young. I think it's going to take time before he's a legitimate starter. Will Levis, it's, did you like him at Kentucky, and did you see enough? I didn't see enough. I liked him at Kentucky. I didn't think he was necessarily a great prospect. So he's going to have the job. I don't think there's any question about that. But what does that offense look like? Like, they need to seriously invest in the offensive line. They're going to have a new coach. We have no idea who that's going to be. So again, I think both these guys, no matter how much you like or don't like them, it's going to be a while until they have the potential to be every week starters.
It's still funny to me that DeAndre Hopkins chose Tennessee. It's just such a weird ending to that saga that was. But
just like when he became a free agent, and not to toot my own horn or say I was right or anything, but the first thing that came to my mind was, why doesn't he go to Carolina? They need it. They need an alpha receiver. Just think of how much the narrative on Bryce Young could be different if he had gone there instead of Tennessee.
Yeah, Bryce Young is throwing to DeAndre.
Now, maybe they didn't want him. I don't know, but why wouldn't you? I mean, why would you not want to get an alpha receiver for your rookie quarterback? It makes, when you didn't have anything.
I'm going to blame on a dysfunctional organization right now in Carolina, but yeah, I'm a little bit higher on Bryce Young than you are. We've been very vocal about that on the show. I'm still holding out some hope of. I still saw things this year that I saw in college that I liked. I think his poise in the pocket is very unique, and I do think he has the right clock to work an NFL offense. I'm with you that the offensive line is paramount right now. He needs a pocket, or he needs to be able to play from shotgun and not get someone pushed 5 yards into his face as soon as the play happens. And that's currently the problem in Carolina. Now, what I want to ask you here about this tier real quick is for Bryce Young specifically, would you rather see them go out, and if you had to pick one or the other, if you rather see them go out, spend big money on a T. Higgins type, and maybe they even add someone else, a tight end or something like that, and through the draft, whatever, or would you rather them get Ben Johnson and scrap it together the rest? If those were the only two options.
Oh, for sure. Get the coach and then build later. Yeah, no question about that.
Yeah, it's kind of an easy question. I just was curious to see if you bite into the T. Higgins cash grab that everyone wants him to have.
I don't know that do you want T. Higgins as an alpha, or does he work better as a B?
he could be. I mean, he's the type of guy that I think where he ends up, if he ends up as the number one, he'll end up as I think he is a B. I'm with you that I think he's a 1B. And I think he gets signed as an A, and then we'll end the season saying, okay, he's a B.
See, I like, as much as I don't want him to go to Chicago, I think it makes a lot more sense for him to go somewhere like Chicago and play with a DJ Moore or something like that.
That'd be great.
I don't know that I would trust him as the undisputed alpha wide receiver in a room that has nothing else behind him.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you that I think it would be, if Caleb Williams ends up being a Bear, and I think T. Higgins would be a better fit in Chicago for fantasy than he would be in Carolina. I'm with you on that. And we've seen with T. Higgins in specific, and plenty of receivers, Bob Woods being one of them, being someone that, plenty of value as the number 2 in an offense. It's not insulting to be the one, as T. Higgins himself knows. Josh points out in the chat that Higgins will probably be paid as a 1A, but he's probably in the Ridley mold as a 1B, masquerading as a 1A. I don't like that Ridley slander. Despite the pain of this year and how bad it looked, that was the rust. I swear.
I agree with Josh.
Yeah. No, I do too, ultimately. I just don't love the Ridley slander because I think he can be a 1. I just think the taking 2 years off football is really quite in the middle of the prime of your career is quite the hit.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's not great. But let's go on down to tier 6 here of the Dynasty quarterbacks. And now we are digging in the dirt in a way with some of them. Some of these guys you can roll out each week, and you have a lot of question marks with the rest. Kirk Cousins being a free agent, we've talked about at length of whether he goes to Minnesota, whether he goes to Atlanta, wherever he ends up. He is dealing with his torn Achilles, so that is going to be a factor for an older quarterback. Matthew Stafford dealing with plenty of injuries in the year. Kind of had a great back half of the season, but ultimately fell in the playoffs. Jared Goff, a Detroit legend now. Baker Mayfield, a Tampa legend right now, and we expect him to be back, right? I mean,
yeah,
right. Well, yeah,
I expected.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it. I just want to make sure. I would be shocked if Baker's out of Tampa next year. Daniel Jones of Will the Giants draft a quarterback. Gino of Will the Seahawks draft a quarterback, and Derek Carr being a money grabbing thief. And Aaron Rodgers being a talk show host. So, yeah, this is tier 6. And if it's fair to say we have questions here, Joel.
Yeah, so these are guys, just to be very simple about it, these are guys who will be productive. I expect to be productive next year, but carry no dynasty value at all. So, maybe if you're holding on to these guys, maybe you can get something for them late in the year when injuries strike and you need something for a playoff push or something like that. But in the offseason, these guys have no trade value. But they're guys that you're going to want to have on your Superflex roster because they will be productive. I think like 3 of these guys missed substantial time with injuries this year. That's probably the percentage who are those guys who the ones who are going to miss a bunch of time. It's anyone's guess, but you got to figure that probably 3 to 4 of these guys are going to miss a bunch of time next year, but the ones who do make it are going to be productive.
Yeah. And, everyone on this list has had good fantasy moments in significant stretches of Daniel Jones last season was a good quarterback due to his running ability, and Baker Mayfield this year has had his moments. Derek Carr, maybe not. Maybe we have to go back a little bit further for him to be fantasy viable in any way. And even then, I can't stand Derek Carr, so I will say he hasn't. But plenty of these guys still have fantasy value. So I'm going to ask you this and echo Gator's great question from earlier. If you're picking one of these guys to make a significant jump into tier 5, tier 4, tier 3, maybe even probably not. Tier 4 is probably the height of these guys jumping. Which one would it be?
So, I mean, to be clear, I don't think any of these guys are going to carry enough trade value
this is the one that
to move into a tier above this significantly. To be the most productive, I still think it's Cousins because no matter where he goes, he's going to have a pretty sound infrastructure to be able to be successful. Derek Carr, you mentioned, I don't like him much either, but things got better for him later in the season once he got healthy. once he got kind of acclimated to the offense. Now, now they're changing offensive coordinators, so that may set everything back. But his cap number is just too big. They're not going to move on from him. They may draft a developmental guy to bring in, but I don't think anyone is usurping that starting role from him. I think he will be a starter next year, and he will carry some back end QB2 value.
And just the perennial Derek Carr effect of just being average to slightly below average to being slightly above average at times, and ultimately being average. So, yeah, and an average can produce solid, okay numbers for Superflex, where you're taking that deep pull, and he should be safe, like you say, to have that role. Especially while Dennis Allen is still there. We don't think he's too happy with Jameis to hand over the reins right now. I'll say Baker. I'm gonna be honest. I'm such a big Baker fan of everything he's overcome and everything he's accomplished. Of if Damar Hamlin didn't literally die on a field last year and come back to life, Baker Mayfield will be my vote for comeback player of the year, because he has been absolutely sensational. And he's led them to a playoff win. Knock on wood, I think they're going to hold their own with Detroit today. And he's going to be back. I think they're going to pay him a bit. I think Mike Evans is back for one more year. I think they run him back with him. Godwin's still there. We expect more additions to this team. And if Dave Canales stays as the offensive coordinator, I think this ascent's only going to continue for Baker Mayfield. We have to keep in mind, let me double check his age, but Baker Mayfield, of all these names on this list, he stands out as the young gun of this bunch. Only 28 years old, turns 29 in April.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's in the same draft class as Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So he's obviously, he's about the same age as Daniel Jones, I would assume. So yeah, those guys are kind of outliers in that way, but
very weird route that Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, they just belong in this tier because they have production value but no trade value.
Yes, 100% with you on that. Let's go down now to tier 7. Oh boy,
the less time spent on this, the better.
Yeah, this is something we could probably just touch on real quick. Russell Wilson, soon to be a free agent and could join the next name on the list of Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh, Mac Jones in New England, Aiden O'Connell in Las Vegas, Sam Howell in Washington, and Desmond Ridder in Atlanta. A star-studded group that will more than likely, we may have one starter of this entire bunch this time next year. Or not this time next year, by week 1.
Yeah, I think that was my point in the article. Is I don't expect any of these guys to be starters at the end of next year. When we do this exercise next year, I don't expect any of these guys to even make the list because they won't be starters.
Yeah, and we don't need to spend too much time on it. Let's just quickly do a little conjecture here, or projection, I guess. Russell Wilson, where is he? Where does he end up?
I don't want to say it because I don't want to make your head explode. Pittsburgh?
No. That's what I think too, and I just don't want it, man. I know they're going to do it, and it's going to equal another 10-win season where they maybe they could win one playoff game and snap that losing streak, but they won't. They won't. It's such a get Justin Fields, get a coordinator.
I agree. I think that should be priority number 1 this offseason. Find a way to trade for Justin Fields.
Hard to get. I can't get my hat back, and everyone has to deal with his hair for the remainder of the stream. But yeah, no, we don't need to spend too much time on this. Assuming Russell Wilson, let's say Russell Wilson's a Steeler and him and Kenny Pickett cannibalize each other, do any of the other people start? Does Mac Jones start in New England next year?
I don't think he starts in New England. I think he's going to turn into the kind of journeyman plug-in starter that will probably start games for probably 4 different teams by the time his career is over, but he's never going to be, someone you're happy with as a long-term option. He's just a, short-term bridge quarterback at best.
Yeah, this is essentially also the Gardner Minshew tier of quarterbacks. We could easily throw him in this bunch.
Yeah, right? I didn't include any backups in this, just guys who were primary starters this season. So
absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, if he gets a job somewhere else, it could be.
Yeah, and that's that. Those are our QB tiers, and this is a great episode to go back to, both now. You can rewatch it already now. Just do a double feature here. But or you could just go back to it when we go into the free agency. We have the draft and a whole bunch of things that's going to be really good to look back on this one. And we'll put timestamps as well, so you can jump to tier to tier to tier and look at exactly what you need and think about who you want to buy and so forth. And of course, you could always reach out to either of us on Twitter. Find me at Michael__Scully. You find Joel here at the Joel Wirth, or you could just go at Club Fantasy FFL, where obviously this show is being hosted and all of amazing content, both video and through print, or not print, but both video and articles you can find on the website there. And obviously Joel's article, please check it out. Great job. We just ran through it. And Joel, you outdid yourself, man.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic job.
We'll be coming every week. We'll hit running backs and then receivers and then tight ends. So it's
about to
be following the schedule. Yeah, we're actually going to be disciplined about writing and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a fun one. And we do have a send-off question with Gator here. Trade question for him. I'm assuming Trey McBride, the 104 and a 25 first. So 2 firsts for Jamar Chase and Evan Engram. I think we need to know if this is tight end premium, right? I don't know if I know that, to be honest, but tight end premium, what are we talking about? If it's Superflex, that changes the answer.
I would want to know how many starters there are and if it's Superflex, 104, McBride. I still don't think that's enough for Chase and Engram, but I could be persuaded if circumstances dictate. I would lean Chase.
I'd lean Chase as well. Just as whenever a trade is close, he does also say he has Laporta, so I don't see the need. I wouldn't trade 2 firsts for. If I had Chase, I wouldn't give up Chase for the 104 and a 25 first. And McBride and Engram, while I have Laporta, it's not really enough to move the needle for me. He says,
if you're getting Chase, then yeah, I love this.
Yeah, are you which side of the trade are you here, Gator? He does say he also owns the 102 and 103, so he has quite the monopoly. So I assume he's getting Chase in this situation.
Yeah, I'm assuming he's getting Chase, and yeah, I love that. Yes,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, we would. Yeah, he said he would be getting Chase. Josh agrees with us, saying Chase side easily in 1 QB, still leaning Chase and Superflex and tight end premium.
Well, the tight end premium really doesn't matter because you got Engram on the other side.
Yeah, it kind of equals out.
So Engram
and he has Laporta.
I mean, I like McBride more than Engram, but if you're getting that as a throwback, that's pretty good. And you had Laporta, so yeah.
Yeah, the only reason it would be relevant is if you want to flex a tight end, which you can, if you had McBride and Laporta, but you're good, man. Best player in the trade is Jamar Chase, and you'd be getting him for 2 firsts while not hurting your tight end depth at all. In fact, you'd probably get another starter.
If your team is that loaded, that 25 first is probably not going to be a high first. So, it's probably going to be back end, which makes it, even closer to the Chase side.
Yeah, and 102 and 103 is going to add significant value to your team.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're in good shape. I'd be curious to see what this team is about. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter about a Gator, because I'm curious, because that sounds like a very interesting situation you've got.
Sounds juicy. I like.
Yeah,
that sounds like a good team.
Yeah. See, this is how we know we're doing the right thing. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. It's been a blast here at the Dynasty After Party, getting back to weekly episodes on Sunday, doing this one a little bit earlier in the day, which, who knows? Maybe that becomes a regular thing. Maybe the after party is really the reflection of Saturday night as opposed to Sunday night. Yeah, there's no shame in when an after party happens like that. And Gator's saying he'll DM us. That's fantastic. So Joel, any final send-offs? I know it's been a tough 24 hours for you, but we got through this show and you got to talk about Jordan Love's brilliance.
We did. A sad final go pack go for the season. But like I said, I tweeted out last night, I love this effing team, and we'll see you in September. So it's going to be a fun, this is going to be a really fun offseason for them, just because they've got 5 top 100 picks. The Aaron Rodgers cap hit comes off, so they're going to have a little bit of money to play with. And their only real needs are kind of non-premium position needs, like safety, inside linebacker, stuff like that. Maybe inside, in interior offensive line. So, yeah, I think there's some moves they can make, and it's going to be a fun offseason.
Yeah, it's not going to be that way.
It's just a shame that it's happening so soon.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a big offseason guy. That's why I'm a Dynasty person. That's why you're a Dynasty person, is because we love the offseason.
Exactly.
And because of that, we got plenty of more shows to talk about. Like Joel said, we're going to be jumping into running backs next week, which, listen, if you thought quarterbacks was a fun one to talk about, running backs is going to be that's going to be a headache. I can already see that one coming. So be sure to follow Joel at the Joel Wirth on Twitter. Be sure to follow Club Fantasy FFL at Club Fantasy FFL. And again, check out Joel's article as well as all the other ones at clubfantasyffl.com. My name is Michael Sicoli. You can follow me at Michael__Sicoli. And have a good one, guys, because remember, Dynasty, it's like a disco ball. Keeps on spinning year-round. So join the club every Sunday at varying times, Monday mornings, nights. That's why you follow on socials, figure out when we're going. But most of the time, you'll be seeing it from us. You'll see us on Sundays. We will see you next week. Best of luck with any bets you may have today, and enjoy your Dynasty week.